Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory, Update 1.2. In this save, I'm using a few of the new game modes that have been added with this update. I need 100 times the space elevator parts to complete each phase. Each machine takes 5 times the normal power. Resource nodes are random, and so is their purity. In the last video, I added more power by way of geothermal generators on the remaining geysers on the map. That wasn't enough, so I converted another 300 crude oil into another 10,000 megawatts here on the lake in the middle of the map. Lastly, I added 6 trucks and 4 train stations in the Grassy Fields and spent a little time dressing it up. And today I'm gonna start using it. I need 50,000 modular engines to complete this phase. I'm gonna be heading out to the rocky desert to create the parts I'm missing. Then load them onto a truck and bring them back to the Grassy Fields. Not too much time has passed since I finished the logistics hub in the Grassy Fields, but I did get a few batteries placed. Since I alternated the colors with the buildings, I decided to kind of keep that theme going, so the first row are black, and then white, and then back to black. And now my ramps going all the way up to the very top make a little bit more sense, and the audio does not sound great with this many machines in one place, I guess. Now I'll have a total capacity of 23,000 megawatts, which is probably a lot for now, but rather be safe than sorry. The main goal for today is to get the modular engines finally automated and sent into the space elevator. Before I run out to the rocky desert, let's go over the plan, because it's actually changed. This was my plan originally. I was going to make 20 modular engines per minute, which would require 40 smart plating per minute. I've already got all of those towers set up, making 30 a minute. I was going to leave all of those the same and then just add another setup somewhere else to add the extra 10 per minute. But getting to this point where I'm finally starting this project has taken so much longer than I anticipated. I have built up quite a large stockpile of smart plating. I already got rid of one container and turned it all into the modular engines and slooped it with a manufacturer, and that took a pretty long time to chew through, but I have so much built up now. I'll show you how much in a second. So that's just not the way I want to go about it anymore. So here is the new plan. I am going to make 30 modular engines per minute. To make 30 modular engines per minute, it requires 60 smart plating per minute. I'm making 30, and I have a gigantic stockpile here. I'm going to use this huge stockpile of smart plating to provide the missing 30 per minute. And there's plenty enough in this stockpile to get me to the end of this phase at this rate. This is going to require 450 rubber, so it's a good thing I created that factory there in the background making 500 per minute. Now I am just missing 60 motors per minute. I decided to change up the recipes a little bit so that I could completely cut out copper. That means I won't be using the copper rotor recipe, which is probably the more efficient way to go about it, at least for power wise. But it's not too much more expensive, it cuts out the copper completely, and it's just a little simpler. To make this many motors, it's going to require a lot of iron going the route I'm going, and a pretty decent amount of Caterium. Let's head out to the rocky desert, and I'll show you where I've picked. Oh, but before we do, let me show you. I've got 57,000 smart plating built up here, and another almost 32,000. It took me a little bit longer to get to this point than I thought it would. Okay, now let's head out to the rocky desert. Welcome back to the rocky desert. Give me 1 or 2 videos and it's gonna look a lot busier out here. Making motors isn't too complicated, and I could do the entire thing out of iron if I wanted to use the iron wire recipe, but Caterium wire is just so efficient. The only downside is the scale. Making 60 motors a minute is a decent amount. I need 810 Caterium ore per minute and 1,920 iron ore per minute, which is exactly 4 completely full Mark IV belts, which is the fastest that I have. And if we take a look at the map, so let's see, iron is pretty much all over the place. So it's really the Caterium that I'm going to have to base this factory around. There is a good amount out here, which is nice. But if we take a look, so this one's pure, this one's pure, well that's impure, and another pure. 2 pure nodes will give me everything I need, and Well, there happens to be a whole bunch of iron over here too. The foundations are placed, and of course, the bean found his way up here. Some things never change. So down here, we've got one of the Caterium nodes that we need. And I think that is about the only easy access. So I'm sure some of you probably knew. But when we look at the map, these nodes, here, let me just fly right over one of them. Should be right here. Oh, look. Where is the iron node? Or the Caterium, or the other iron nodes? Yeah, I'm sure most of you know where they are. So that is a problem for future me. They're still accessible. It's just going to take a little bit more work. Okay, so I think I'm going to cover that up, and I'll probably end up using this space back here for something. Inevitably, I'm going to have to do some sort of load balancing. The towers are all going to go this way. If we take a look at the spreadsheet, you may have been wondering if I made a typo or not, because there's 2 lines of the exact same thing of iron pipe, and same thing with ingots. But it is not a typo. It ended up just working out really conveniently that way, because I really like having one tower lead into the next. And I don't remember it normally working out this well, but it did this time. The amount of steel pipes I need for the rotors and quick wire stators are exactly the same. I don't normally pick that combo of recipes, but it ended up being kind of convenient. Now I can just copy the same thing twice because it does require quite a few towers. If we look at the inputs, I'm already dealing with twice what a belt can handle, so I would probably be breaking this up into multiple towers anyways. Saves me even more time because now I just need to set the recipes once. Each of these towers will be making 960 iron ingots. Up until recently, I was placing 10 times the amount of machines to bring down the power consumption below 50% of what it normally would be. But I've recently discovered that if I place 5 times the normal amount, so half as much as I was placing, I can still bring down that power consumption to about 60% of what it normally would be, and I get to place half as many machines. I think that's a good trade-off, because now we're starting to ramp up how much I need, and that would be a lot of machines to place 10 times as many of. And I'm still not keeping it as a hard rule, so 32 times 5 would be 160. I'm going to place 144 because that's 8 of the blueprints. Which I know I could place 9 and that would be pretty easy, but 8 will pair up nicer to what they're leading into. So 144 machines divided by the default rate of 30 per minute. Multiply that by 100. 22 and 2/9%. On the smelters, I'm going to try to remember to add these little portrait signs because it really is convenient. I don't need to change that. These iron towers are going to have inputs of 2 full 480 belts. As far as building these, I feel like you guys have seen me struggle through building these without a jetpack, building them with the jetpack. So now my excuse for using Fly is I think it'll just give you a better viewing experience. See, if I use you guys as a scapegoat, then I don't feel as bad about using it. But it does allow me to not have to jump around and move around as much, and hopefully give some of you a little bit less motion sickness. There's number 1. Now I just need 7 more. I think I may want to run back to the hub where I have all of the basic materials being made. And I think I might want to add a few more dimensional depots to my iron plates. Alright, so there's number 8. Delete that extra portrait sign. And let me run back to the hub real quick to make the rest of these towers not so painful. I should really set this up differently, but it's temporary. There we go. Doubled the upload speed. That will definitely help. The way I want to lay out these towers is going to be the 1 iron, and then we'll do the 2 different Caterium amounts, and then the second iron tower. So let's figure out the next one that we're going to do here. And strangely enough, this is another one where I actually only need to set the recipe once. Even though I need 2 different amounts. For one tower I need 270, for the other tower I need double that, I need 540. So again, just need to set the clock speed once. So for this one, let's do it with the incoming amount. I'm going to be dealing with 270 ore. For that amount, I'll use 2 blueprints, which would be 36 smelters. The default rate is 45 ore per minute, since we're dealing with the input and not the output. And then lastly, we just multiply by 100. 16 2/3, each machine will output 2.5. Terrific. Update my portrait sign. One tower will need 270, the other one I'll just add it times 2. I'll stick with my 2 foundations as a gap. So for every 270, I need 2 of these. This first tower is going to be the 540, so I need 4 blueprints. This second one, I only need 2. Now I can delete my extra portrait signs. The one on the right is going to be times 2. And just to give my dimensional depot a second to refill before I spam it down a whole bunch, let's connect the power. Even though I've got the daisy chaining, because these have the 3 floors, it's just easier to keep everything in a line. But when I switch to blueprints that only have 2 things in the floor, then I just use the daisy chaining straight down. And it's things like this that are 10 times easier using the fly mod. And for those wondering, it is pack utility that I'm using, and all of the mods are listed in the description. Lastly, for the row smelters, I just need to copy the iron tower again. And that's number 8. Doing the Caterium load balancing is very straightforward since I only have 2 and then 4 towers. Just need 1 splitter in front of this one. That's too far forward. There we go. And then for the 4, I just need the 2. But for both of the iron towers, we are going to need 3 splitters. I actually only need 2. Because I need 2 belts of 480. So one 480 belt is going to go to the first 4 blueprints. And then the next 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, are going to be fed by the second belt. So I'm really just doing the same thing I am for this tower, just twice. Because the second belt is going to skip all the way up to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, up to here. So we're just going to copy this. And now that I've placed all of these foundations, I actually think I'm going to be able to get away with just not having these. This part's fairly basic. Let me just show you what it looks like. And in the blink of an eye, we've got all the lifts in place. Here's where the 2 different 480 belts will plug in. The first one will get split 4 ways for the first 4 blueprints. And then the second one goes all the way up to here. And then I just spun that splitter sideways because I only need to split it in half. And then we do the same thing for the second 4. I like dealing with 2, 4, or 8 blueprints. This is easy. I need to do the same thing with the second Caterium one since I can't fit all 540 on one belt. It's going to need to be 2 belts of 270. So the first one feeds the first 2 blueprints, and then the second one comes up to here and then feeds the second 2. Now we move on to the constructors. A whole lot of steel pipes. All of the iron ingots are going into these towers. Each one of these steel pipe towers is going to output 240. I'm going to be using 4 blueprints at 12 apiece. That would be 48 divided by the default rate of 25 multiplied by 100. Yep, that checks out. I needed 9.6. I probably could have done that math. It never hurts to double check. Going from the smelters to the constructors, I don't need a lot of space, so the 2 foundations of a gap is fine. Although later on, I think I'm going to need a little bit more. Now, since I have 8 towers of smelters and 4 towers of constructors, and since I'm dealing with twice as many ingots as one belt can handle, it's going to make a lot more sense now. Good old smelter towers are off by that half nudge. It always does make the smelter towers a little bit more interesting. I'm going to have every 2 towers and nudge this over by the half meter so that it's directly in line with the merger. And then I just nudge it over 1, 2, 3, 4 meters. And then I know it'll be in the right spot. Let's see, I'm dealing with 960 divided by 8. Each blueprint is outputting 120. Probably just make these Mark III just to make sure. We'll get plugged into there. Every 2 blueprints of smelters, I'm just going to get grouped up, and then those will go into one of the blueprints of constructors. So now I just need to set up another one of these right in front of this one. And there's the second 48 constructors I need for iron pipe. Now let's make some wire and quick wire. Let's go the next one over from this one, which would be the one using 540 Caterium, which becomes 180 Caterium ingots, and that is going to be used for quick wire. These are going to be making 900 quick wire. To do that, I'm going to place 8 blueprints at 12 apiece. That's 96 machines divided by the default rate of 60, multiplied by 100. I probably could have gotten away with only doing 6 of the blueprints. I think it'll be easiest doing the same thing where I can just kind of pair up 1 blueprint to 2. So these are just going to go right in front of this tower. Now 8 of these. And there's the 8 towers. Yep, same height as the smelters. One last tower to go for this row, and I'm going to be turning the other Caterium ingots into wire. And for the last tower, even though it's using Caterium ingots, we're making wire, so let's make it the copper color. I'm going to be making 720 wire, and to do that, I only need 3 blueprints, which is 36 constructors divided by the default rate of 120. Multiply by 100. Terrific. Each machine will output 20. And just 3 blueprints for this. It's coming along together pretty well. Now I just want to knock out this simple belt work before we move on. Alright, so like I did over on the other side, I'm going to pair up every 2 iron smelters with 1 of the iron pipe constructor blueprints. For this, I just need to combine the 2 smelter towers and then run that into 1 splitter, split it between these 3. And then for the other Caterium ingots, it's the other way around. 1 smelter blueprint will then get split into 2 of the constructors. But that's pretty straightforward. Let's skip ahead, I'll show you what it looks like, and we'll move on to placing assemblers. Things are starting to get a little bit busier. Here we can see it all come together. Like we just talked about, both of the iron towers are exactly the same, so we're just grouping up 2 of the smelter towers. Those come together, and then over to here. So as we get higher up, then the lifts just start getting a little bit longer, because this very last one has to drop down a few floors. And then the Caterium to quick wire was just the opposite, where it's just the 1 smelter tower goes over to a splitter, which feeds the 2 constructor towers. And this one, we just group up the 2, and then resplit it up. So far so good. Let's move on to the assemblers. There's been a lot of gray so far. Let's add a little yellow and blue. Let's go ahead and start with the quick wire stators. This tower is going to be outputting 120 stators. To do that, I am going to use 12 blueprints at 6 apiece, that's 72 machines, divided by the default rate of 8, and we're just over the 20%. That's good enough for me. Unsurprisingly, the quick wire stators are going to go right in front of the quick wire. And here's where I'm going to start to space things out a little bit more. Since I need 12 blueprints in this tower, giving myself 1 more foundation is probably a good idea. Only 10 more. We're getting it a little taller now. The assembler blueprints are 2 floors as opposed to the 3 floors of the constructors and the smelters. Using the daisy chain with this one is much easier. Now I can just go into straight line and just connect these two. And now for the other recipe, which I actually haven't used the steel rotors yet this playthrough. I think they may have finally fixed this search bar. I've used it a few times and it's actually worked each time. For a while, you would type things in and they just wouldn't show up. Even though you definitely had it, you could scroll through and find them. So glad that it works better now. Motors need equal parts, rotors and stators, so I'll be making the same 120. Since each machine only makes 5 as opposed to 8, I need to use a few more blueprints. I'm going to be using 18, which is 108 assemblers. Default rate of 5, multiplied by 100, 22 and 2 9ths. That's close enough. I don't really want to place more than 18 blueprints. Alright, now just 18 of these blueprints. Let's see how tall this goes. Well, that's halfway. I definitely want to increase my concrete production. I think I only have 4 dimensional depots hooked up to the concrete, and that is just clearly not enough for projects like this. The tower is in, and just to show you how ridiculous this is getting. We go up to this height, we start to get that fog down below. And that brings us up to the first assembler tower. But the other one is a bit taller. We're about as high as the highest point in the game. Now, here comes the fun part of getting to load balance this whole thing. Let's start with the shorter of the 2 towers, and let me see if I can describe this in a way that makes sense. This is 12 blueprints tall. Since splitters divide by either 2 or 3, I am going to need 3. 2 of them are going to divide in half, whereas one of them is going to need to divide in 3. Which order you do that in really doesn't make any difference. It's just going to change the layout of the lifts ever so slightly. And really, the second tower is going to be pretty much identical. The only difference is instead of only one is going to split in half, and 2 of them are going to split into thirds. But of course, to make things more complicated, that really only works for one of the 2 parts. So for the steel pipes, that's how it's going to lay out for this first one. I'm dealing with 900 quick wire, and that doesn't all fit on one belt. So for the quick wire, we actually only need the first 2. So what I'm going to do is group up the bottom 4 of these, get them all merged together. Here's our steel pipes, and this very first one is going to be splitting it in half. So for the quick wire, having the 2 belts is basically the same thing. And here I'm going to do the splitter that splits it 3 ways as the last one. I think that'll be easiest. That goes there, and I do need to add a bunch of these. Now I have that one extra spot to use. Working from the right, they should all plug right into the splitter, except for the very last one. That one just goes all the way to the ground, and we connect that one with the belt. And then up on the first floor, we kind of have to start with the right, since that one's right in front of the splitter. And these 2 continue up to the 3rd floor. So that takes care of the first 3. This one right here is going to go all the way up to the 4th floor. Now for these splitters, they basically go in the next spot, and we can just use the outside ones. And then once we get to this spot, we just repeat what we did on the first floor, basically. So we start with splitters, and then that is going to get split all 3 ways and feed the next 3. Now for the big tower. Even though it's so big, it's really not too bad. And I'm still going to have to deal with the same sort of thing as I did with the quick wire, because I'm making 720 wire. Now this is split in between 3 blueprints. So I'm thinking of just leaving this as 3 separate outputs, because we're going from 3 to 18. So I figure I'll just pair up one of these blueprints with every 6. So even though I did it split in half, split in half, split into thirds, this one I'm going to do it a little bit different. We're going to split into thirds, split it into half, and then split it into thirds, because the last one is basically the 3 different belts that I already have here. But that's how all of the steel pipes are going to end up getting split up. Alright, so this is going to start the same way, where the very last splitter is splitting it into thirds. That'll feed that blueprint and the 2 above it. But then the middle one is only going to split it in half, so I only need 1 floor hole for each one. And then I'm only going to need this one and this one for the very last one. Because only the iron pipes are going to get split all 18 times. It's crazy how similar the load balancing for these two ended up being. And I know this seems like a lot and probably pretty crazy to a lot of you, but once you kind of get in the groove, it's really not too bad. But between those 2 recipes, that's 180 assemblers, all load balanced. Now we just need to work on 1 more tower. We'll make the final tower have nice bright red pillars. It's hard to miss that way. This is going to be 60 motors per minute. And I'm going to be using 12 blueprints, just like I did for the stators. So that's 72 assemblers, default rate of 5, multiplied by 100. Terrific. Since I'll be dealing with 12 blueprints again, I want to give myself the 3 foundations of a gap. And since there's 12, I want to line it up in front of the other tower that only has 12. Because now I can just do that for all of the stators, and I can just make the belt work easy. And I just think it looks cool when you have a whole bunch of the belts going from one tower to the next like this. 1 down, 11 to go. There we go, there's number 12. Since these come out right at the very middle, but then these are offset, if I go from here to here, it's going to put the curve closest to the splitter. But if I want to give myself a little bit more space over here, I can go from the splitter back to the merger, and that'll put the little curve over here. So now I can at least eliminate half of the load balancing I need to do. Alright, so now since we're going from 18 blueprints to 12, I could pair up every 3 and split it between every 2. But I think that's going to be more hassle. So I'm just going to collect all 120 rotors onto 1 belt, send them over, and then just do half of that same load balancing we did for that tower, just across this one now. Ta-da! More lifts in place. Since the splitters are offset, it ended up working out pretty well that the bottom one feeds straight into the bottom one over here, because that allowed the second row, since it's lifted up, that just kind of misses it each time it has to split. So, a very familiar pattern. I've seen this a few times. Just a quick 876 machines, all to make 60 motors a minute. Man, just think if I was still aiming for that 10% or underclock speed. Oof. Now I just have to hook up the initial inputs. In total, I need 4 pure iron nodes and the equivalent of 3 270 belts of Caterium. Right below this whole platform, I've got 1 pure Caterium node, and the others are just right about in here somewhere, just a few meters below the surface. So there are a number of different ways to get into this cave. I think the closest might be back there somewhere, but in my opinion, the easiest one is just going to be head right out here. So you just head west, drop down. The only tricky part with going in this side is if you try to come to this cave too early, the whole thing will be blocked off by these rocks. But I can just explode them. And here we are. One of the weirdest things I've seen in this save yet. Crude oil in my cave. This is not ideal. I guess I can be happy that it's not one of the pure nodes that's down here, but still, I'm probably going to want to use this at some point, and that means I'm just going to have to pump it out, I think. But if we continue this way, let's see what else we've got. A pure iron node. Well, I do need a few of those. So there's one pure node, here's a pure node, and here's another pure deuterium. Let me clear out the rest of the spiders, get a few foundations placed, and then I'll show you how I like to get all of these nodes out of this cave. Alright, we've got a very basic setup. We've got the 2 miners there, those are just going on some foundations up to here. Then we meet up with the third one. And then all 3 make their way over real close to the oil. Just make sure that this fits. Perfect. That should be still enough space. Yeah, that'll be able to get out of there. So now if I look at the map, I should be right past where my platform is. This is another instance where the cartograph mod is just super useful. I can see where my whole platform is above me. Now I'm going to take a foundation, place it here, put it in vertical, and go all the way up to the ceiling. This section is pretty tall. We'll go up to here, and then I'm going to switch it to a 1 meter. And if you wanted it to be really close, you could get it pretty close, as long as you can still kind of get to this spot of the foundation. So right there would be fine. I can just zoop that across. Let's make sure, yep, I can still access up there. Delete all of these. And before I get too far, one of the keys here is to be using the world grid. So I'm using the world grid above, and when you hold control, it'll snap to the world grid, which means a foundation placed here, and then if I went up to the surface and I used the world grid up there, there will be another foundation that would line up perfectly with this one, which is important because it makes this next step a whole lot easier. I have 3 belts, so I'm going to do something like that. Now this section down here is just a tiny bit too tall, but thankfully if I go the opposite direction and I place it down here at the bottom and then look at the floor hole, it'll let me place it. Definitely need these to be Mark IV lifts. So this next step is 10 times easier with fly, but just to prove that you can do it without it, I'm going to turn it off. So now to start, I needed to get to the top of my foundation so that I can get to this spot of the floor hole. I'm going to click it once here, and I can rotate it, but that doesn't make the biggest difference right now. And now I am going to, I'm going to crouch to get out of here. And the conveyor lift is still here, so I have only clicked it once, and I haven't built it, right? I can still select how tall I want. And I'm not going to click it, I am just going to fly all the way out the cave, back up to the top. Alright, and now you can see those arrows through the ground. And when I bring it up, there we go. So like I said, I placed the floor hole right in the center of the foundation, and that's exactly where this is coming through. Right in the center of the foundation. The ground isn't too thick right here, so you could actually go pretty high, but I only needed to come to right here. And for the first one, I could just fake the floor hole and just leave that lift here. And then the other 2 should be going south, so it should be here and here. And so with the other ones, I have the option. I could either connect them right underneath, which is probably what I'll do, because it gives you the option to easily move the direction or change the elevation up here without having to replace the whole thing. The fly mod just makes that way easier to do. So I'm going to use that for the next 2. But it absolutely can be done. The jetpack is good enough. Welcome back. Let me give you a quick little tour. Starting with the farthest points and working our way back to the factory. The cave hasn't changed too much since I just started it, but I figured I might as well get the oil extractor in here. It's not connected to power. Not like it would matter, it would just back up and stay idle. So now I've got the normal oil node, the pure Caterium, and 2 pure iron nodes, all being sent to the surface. Even though this motor factory is probably temporary, I have a feeling this section right here is probably going to stay. But since this tower isn't really permanent, I'm going to leave the decoration phase for probably whenever I end up using the oil. When I have to come back here, I'll spend a little time dressing it up. The cave took care of 2 of the iron nodes that I needed, so here's the third one. It had a little ways to go, but really not that far. The 4th and final iron node is just on the other side of all of the towers. It really didn't have very far to go. In total, I need 810 Caterium ore, so I thought it would be easiest if I set them both for the same. As far as power usage, it's the slightly better way to go instead of doing one at 480 and then the other one at whatever the difference is. But if you'll remember, what I really need is belts of 270. So that comes up here. Heads up and over the iron node and then up to that platform. I told you I would eventually need to do some sort of load balancing, but all I really needed was just a simple 2 to 3 belt balancer. 2 belts of 405 enter. They both get split 3 ways. Each one of their outputs goes to a different merger. Quick, easy, simple way to turn the 2 belts of 405 into 3 belts of 270. The belts from the cave are popping up right here. Even though I'm only clocking this one to 405, I can get the full 480, and I figured it'd be best if I just left the signs to show what they are. And here's that 300 crude oil that I still have available. For now, all 60 motors are getting merged up until they get to the very bottom, and then right into the sink they go. But that won't last long. I just want to make sure that everything's up and running. Once this is at 100%, then we're going to ship them back out to the grassy fields. Let's get the stopwatch ready, and let's see how long it takes to go from 0 to 60 motors a minute. Now we're finally starting to hit 60. It's definitely going to bounce around. But all things considered, having to have over 800 machines start up and ramp up to 100%, wasn't too bad. And let's take a look. It's not like I really need the coupons right now, but I do like to see the graph go up. I'm going to let this continue to run while I work on the next project. That way I can make sure that there's no hidden issues, and obviously then I can correct it before I actually need these. Currently the road ends pretty much right after I got into the rocky desert. I wasn't sure at all where it was going to go. I've still got my little test truck station over there. Now I need to delete that and bring the road a little bit closer. Alright, I've laid some road. Since this part right here was laying a whole bunch of the foundations you've already seen me place, we're skipping ahead a little bit. So the road originally ended somewhere around here. I've still got some power cables to clean up, but now it is extended right to in front of our new towers. I only needed one ramp section to increase the elevation so that I could get up and over all the rest of these. And now we've got a pretty clear shot to the other end of the desert. The towers are working away and haven't found any issues. So now I just need to add a truck station. And because of the elevation change, I think it'd be easier just to drop the motors down to this level. So now what I'm going to do is just delete this section. And I'm going to grab my T-junction piece. Blueprint auto connect. At least half of it'll connect. I think it deleted some of the paths. Alright, now we can just grab a flat piece and build off from here. And let's double check. Yep, everything's green. I do love the Blueprint Auto Connect. It is a really nice feature for this stuff. Alright, so once we get to here, I think that's probably close enough. Now I'm just going to place down a few foundations. Alright, so with right-hand drive, I think it'd just be easiest to have the truck station over here. And just have it right in line with this. That side connected, and then I'm not sure why those sections are green, but there's only going to be one truck. I'll probably play around with this and try to clean it up a little bit. I guess in default mode, it was just ended up being too close. But once I put it into straight mode, it just made it go out a little bit farther, but now there's no weird intersection. With only one truck, it wasn't going to make a difference, but just fixing those issues seems like a good habit to get into. The motors right now are going through a smart splitter and then down into the truck station. Since I'm not quite ready for them over at the Grassy Fields, I figure I'll just have them load up the truck station, and that way I'll have a whole bunch of them to ship at once. But if it takes me too long, then they'll just go back into the sink for now. And that takes care of the motors. All that's left is to place a truck and set up its path, and then I'll have motors available in the Grassy Field. So let me head back out there and we'll talk about the final piece to this puzzle. Back in the Grassy Fields, we are at the south end, right next to the monstrosity that is creating the 30 smart plating per minute. I've got a few more foundations placed, so we're not done building yet. For these new towers, I need the Mark II blueprinter. I have two different versions and they're almost identical. The difference is one has it for all 4 inputs, the other one only has 3. And for Modular Engines, I luck out and only need the 3. Laid out the same way as the towers for the rest of the machines, it's just manufacturers are so much bigger. Each floor has 2 manufacturers load balanced. It just needs the 3 different inputs to plug into these 3 splitters, and you've got 4 manufacturers all load balanced. These will be taking in the motors, rubber, and smart plating and turning them into the modular engines. Now, the downside with this recipe is the 1 per minute. So if I want to make 30 per minute, that means I need 30 machines. And if I'm trying to place 5 times as many to bring the power consumption down to about 60%, that is 150 manufacturers. Divided by 4 per blueprint, well, 37.5 is obviously not a number I'm going to pick. Even though it won't bring the clock speed down quite as much, I think I'm going to go with 32. Because that is going to be a much easier number to load balance. So that's still 128 manufacturers. Let's set the clock speed. It's going to be 30 modular engines divided by the 128 machines, divided by the default rate of 1. Well, guess we didn't need to do that part. Multiply by 100. 23.4. That's still going to bring down the power consumption by quite a bit. Which out of all of the steps is important on this one. Because if I were to place 30 machines at 100% clock speed, that would cost me over 8,000 megawatts. It might make more sense to place the towers on that side just because it's closer to everything. But I kind of just want them to line up in a row with all the other things on the side. So they're going to come to here. And yeah, don't need that much space in between them, I don't think. Since I'm going to place 32, I want to see if I can do it in just 2 towers. I know I could do 4 towers of 8 blueprints, that would be easy, but let's see how ridiculously tall this gets. Great thing about building in the Grassy Fields is I don't actually have to wait for my dimensional depots. Yeah, it's a little tall. And that's the first 64 manufacturers that I need. Wow, from the ground, this looks ridiculous. Both towers are in. Just a little bit of load balancing now. At least all of the inputs are small enough amounts that each one fits on its own belt. I've got 60 motors, 60 smart plating, and then 450 rubber, so it's close, but it all fits on one incoming belt, making my life just a little bit easier. Because this was going to be such a massive amount of machines and blueprints to place, I wanted to make things easier, and that's why I picked 32 blueprints. So the initial mounts will all get plugged into these splitters right here. Normally I put the part that has the highest quantity on the bottom, so that would be 450 rubber plugging into there. And then we'll have 250 here, 250 to go into that side. And then we're just splitting it in half over and over again. 250 will be 125, and then 62.5, and then what was that, 31 and a quarter. That means I can definitely use all of Mark 1 for the last two. And for the top two, it can be Mark 1 for all of them since it's such a small amount. And as far as the belt work goes, I'm probably going to do it so each one faces inward. Alright, so just to get things lined up. Okay, so the first one goes here. Use my hotkey. But I have 3 splitters, so that means I need to do 3 floor holes. And then these are just going to plug in like that. And the next splitter will be there. Third one will be here. And then last will be right here. And that's the first floor. And then we come up to the second floor. And pretty easy. That takes care of the second floor, and now we just need to extend these floor holes. And then on the third floor, since there's no floor holes on this spot, now I need to add some splitters. And then we're basically going to copy that first section. That'll feed these 2 floors. And then once I get up to this floor, then I'm only going to have floor holes here and here. So at this point now I would need 2 layers of splitters. And we just continue that pattern all the way up. And then do it again on the second one. Ah, isn't it beautiful? Look at all those lifts. I've got all the lifts on both sides in. It was obviously a lot to put in. But you'd be surprised how quickly you can do it once you kind of get into the groove. On the opposite side of the tower, to get things grouped up, instead of having each tower group things up individually all the way down, and then one final merger to bring the 2 towers together, I could place about half the amount of mergers if I combine the products on the same floor. And then the mergers just have to alternate forward and back instead of side to side. That groups up the 16 blueprints on each tower all the way down here at the bottom, and we'll have the 30 head over to a truck station. Because of course we're going to put these on shuttles and take them over there. All the infrastructure is set up, it's actually easier than belting it over there. And here's the second truck station. This one is going to be bringing the smart plating back from over there. So this whole time, these shuttles right here have been taking the 30 per minute smart plating from here over to that massive amount of storage that I have right over here. And now what I'm going to do is place another truck station over there, because that one is still going to receive things. And then I'm basically going to reverse the flow, and that huge stockpile of smart plating will then get sent with shuttles back over here. Yeah, in hindsight, I should have just been storing them over here instead of there, but I only planned things out so far in advance. The rubber is coming from in here. Since this is right next to the truck station, what I think I'm going to do is just get that belted over somehow into here, and then that way I can take both the rubber and the motors, and I can run them on belts over to there. Because the motors are only 60 per minute, I could use more shuttles to do it, but with how much rubber I'm dealing with, I don't really want to use the shuttles. I'm just going to send them on belts. Alright, so I've got that part taken care of. I'm making 500 rubber, and I need to send 450 of it to that new modular engine factory. 400 rubber is coming from upstairs, and so that belt is coming along the floor, and then once it gets to this point, the 100 rubber from the residual rubber step, I'm just making as much as I can out of the polymer resin, which ended up being 100, so I'm splitting that in half, so 50 of it is still going to my storage. And then the other 50 is grouping up with the 400, and then that just comes along here, goes down a ways, and then exits the factory. It pops up right here, and into the station. But it's just running along the floor so that it can then meet up with the motor, and then those two can run side by side and head over to the two ginormous towers. The smart plating is now being reversed, and they are slowly being merged up and sent into this new truck station. And then those same shuttles are just taking it along this road and bringing it back to over here. Since I have so much of it, just to get things running, I'm just syncing it. So I've rerouted the 30 per minute smart plating from this whole factory. That's coming over here. Since it is still kind of bursty, I'm using a storage container to make sure that I get a consistent 30 per minute out of here. Same thing with the 30 per minute from my massive amount of stored smart plating. Those get grouped together, and that's the 60 per minute that will eventually go into the towers, but for now, I'm just syncing it. We're just getting everything running first. So that's the smart plating and the rubber. Let's go get the motor truck going. Alright, so now when we pull into the truck station here, I'm just going to go ahead and use this very first one on the right, just because since it's going to exit just on the other side of this wall essentially, just makes the belting easy. I threw the few turbo fuel that I had on me in here, which isn't very much, so we're going to stop right here to pick up some more fuel. Then we're going to go all the way out to the rocky desert to the motor pickup, and then it'll make its way back. Even if I speed this up, it's a pretty long trip, so I'll probably try to chop it into pieces. So, enjoy the ride! The motors have successfully made it to the grassy field. That round trip was kinda long. This is something I should have gone over before we went through all of this, but let's just go through some quick math and make sure that my truck can maintain that throughput. Since I know how many motors I'm trying to move, I can calculate what would be the maximum round trip time. A truck has 48 slots. Motors stack to 50, meaning it can hold 2,400 at once. Since I'm trying to move 60 per minute, That means my truck needs to complete its round trip in under 40 minutes. So I know it was a long round trip and probably pretty close to around 20 minutes. Still nowhere near 40, and I don't have to worry. It's probably going to have about half an inventory each trip. The motors and the rubber just make their way over and then pop up from underneath right here. And just to get everything up and running, I've got them headed into sinks. But it's about that time we can delete them. Just because this is a pretty big power draw all on its own, I have it and the motors as the very last priority. So if I do trip the breaker, it's just going to be these that shut off. Even though this is a crazy number right here, it's not going to be an issue. Alright, so let's go ahead and flip the switch. And that's not actually going to get anything started quite yet, since all of the inputs are still being sunk. Since 2 of the 3 are much slower, I'm going to get the motors and the smart plating sent in first, then we'll do the rubber. Here comes the first batch of modular engines. Making my way up the towers, it looks like they're all outputting. And even the ones at the very top are already on. While I continue to let this warm up, let's go ahead and set up the cart. Since I'm only making 30 per minute, I probably only need like 2. Get him close to the path here. Modular engines out to the space elevator. And there he goes. One more, just to make sure we've got good throughput. The towers are pretty tall, and I used all Mark 1 belts to gather everything. Let's see how long this takes for it to finally read 30 per minute. For 128 manufacturers, I'm pretty happy. Look at them go. All those modular engines. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. I now have a larger amount of power storage in my world. This is good for now, but I definitely want more. Then I went out to the rocky desert and added towers to crank out 60 motors per minute. I extended the road and put them on a truck going back to the grassy fields. I then combined the new motors, smart plating, and rubber into 2 massive towers that produce 30 modular engines per minute. I now have 2 of the 3 parts automated and headed to the space elevator. That leaves the adaptive control unit as the last part. And hey, I only need 10,000. Look forward to that. And thanks for watching.